Welcome, everyone, to vpod.ai. I'm your host, Mike, and with me is our guest, Susan.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here.
You can sponsor this podcast for just $25. Your message will be featured across major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and more. If you're interested, visit vpod.ai to get started today.
Honestly, that is such a wild deal for anyone listening.
Right. It really is. So I want to jump right into this because what if I told you, or anyone listening right now, that the most effective, totally scientifically validated cognitive enhancement drug on the market isn't, some Silicon Valley smart pill?
Yeah, or some crazy biohacked supplement.
Exactly. It's actually quite literally just a pair of running shoes. Today, we're getting into how physical activity is arguably the single most transformative thing you can do for the most complex structure known to humankind, which is, of course, your own brain.
We really do spend a tremendous amount of time in our culture talking about physical exercise, but mostly in terms of aesthetics.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Like reducing waistlines or getting abs.
Yeah, building muscle mass or maybe, lowering cholesterol if you're looking at health markers. But the neurological implications of simply elevating your heart rate are just staggering.
I mean, it's mind-blowing.
It really is. We're going to look at the exact biological mechanisms behind why breaking a sweat immediately alters your brain chemistry and how it physically changes your brain's cellular anatomy over time.
Which is the craziest part to me.
Yeah, and then how it acts as an actual, literal physical shield against age-related cognitive decline.
So to kind of ground this for you guys listening in a real-world scenario, I want you to imagine functioning at a super high professional level, but feeling completely, utterly burnt out.
Like completely depleted.
Right. You're sluggish, you're isolated, and your physical energy levels are practically non-existent. Like,
Yeah.
you're getting your work done, but you are just absolutely miserable doing it.
And that specific scenario basically describes a highly prominent memory researcher and neuroscientist from a few years ago.
Yeah, and she was at the absolute pinnacle of her field, right?
Yeah, she was. I mean, her daily work literally involves studying how brief bursts of electrical activity in brain cells actually form new memories. She was successfully decoding how neurons communicate and how they map out spaces and retain information.
So from the outside, she is just professionally dominating. But she eventually realizes her personal reality is just a total mess.
A complete mess, yeah. She basically had zero social life. She's spending all her waking hours alone in a dark, soundproofed lab.
Oh, man, just sitting there.
Just listening to the auditory feedback of brain cells firing in a dish. That was her life.
And physically, it took a toll, too, right? I mean, she had gained like 25 pounds and basically just stopped moving her physical body entirely.
Yeah, and it took her a really long time to even acknowledge the toll that extreme sedentary lifestyle was taking on her, especially on her mental health.
So what was the wake-up call?
The turning point actually came when she booked a river rafting trip, and she went totally by herself, mostly because she didn't even have a social circle to invite.
That's really sad, honestly.
It is. But instead of this relaxing getaway, the trip served as a brutal physical wake-up call. She quickly realized that she was like the weakest person on the entire raft.
Oh, that is a terrible feeling.
Right. She was really struggling with just the basic physical demands of the excursion.
But I love her reaction to this because instead of just ignoring that reality and going back to her dark lab, she basically decides she's never going to feel like the weakest person on a raft ever again.
Exactly. She comes home and immediately hits the gym. And because she has this highly driven, type A personality, she doesn't just casually walk on a treadmill.
No, she goes all in.
She throws herself into the deep end. We're talking kickboxing, dance, yoga, step classes, literally everything.
And it had to be off as at first.
Oh, she totally embraced the physical discomfort. It was incredibly difficult. But what kept her returning wasn't some distant promise of losing weight.
Right.
It was this realization that after every single sweat-inducing workout, she experienced a massive, undeniable shift in her mood and her energy.
Which brings us to the real aha moment, right? Fast forward a year and a half into this really rigorous exercise program. She's physically stronger, she lost the weight, but then she experiences this profound realization while just sitting at her desk.
Yeah, she was doing something that basically every academic universally dreads, which is grant writing.
Oh, man. The worst.
It is notoriously frustrating. It's this tedious task where you have to synthesize vast amounts of complex data just to, beg for funding.
But something was different this time.
Right, suddenly a thought crosses her mind that she just hadn't experienced in years. She realizes grant writing is actually going really well today.
Okay, I have to stop you there because I am struggling to see why grant writing is the benchmark here. Like, people hate grant writing because it's just tedious bureaucracy, not necessarily because their brains are failing.
That's a fair point, but it's actually the perfect benchmark because grant writing demands immense executive function.
Okay, how so?
Well, it requires synthesizing disparate pieces of information, maintaining really intense concentration, and continuously overriding that psychological impulse to just procrastinate or quit.
Ah, I see. So it's a heavy cognitive load.
Exactly. Those functions demand a massive amount of metabolic energy from very specific regions of the brain. So when she realized that this cognitive heavy lifting suddenly felt effortless, it prompted her to pivot her entire scientific career.
She basically had to understand the biological why behind her own mental transformation.
Yes. She needed to know what was happening inside her head.
Well, let's break down that biology for everyone, starting with the immediate aftermath of a workout.
Yeah.
Because, a single gym session doesn't change your brain's anatomy overnight, but it clearly does something chemical.
Right. The very second you complete a cardiovascular workout, your brain releases this really potent chemical cocktail.
Like an immediate flood.
Yep. Your elevated heart rate has pumped all this extra oxygen and blood to your brain, which then triggers the release of 3 crucial neurotransmitters: dopamine, serotonin, and noradrenaline.
Okay, we hear those terms thrown around constantly in, pop psychology, but what is each one actually doing in that specific moment?
So dopamine is deeply tied to motivation, reward, and that feeling of accomplishment. It's literally the reason you feel a sense of triumph when you drop the weights at the end of a set.
Okay, that makes sense. What about serotonin?
Serotonin regulates mood and stress. So a surge of it helps clear away the anxiety or maybe the frustration you might have carried into the gym with you.
Like a mental reset.
Exactly. And then noradrenaline, which is also called norepinephrine, is responsible for arousal and alertness. It basically wakes up your entire nervous system.
So when people talk about a runner's high, you aren't just feeling some generic buzz. You are actively bathing your brain in the specific chemicals required to regulate stress and hyperfocus your attention.
And that chemical flood actively improves your brain's ability to shift and sustain focus. The data actually shows that this acute improvement in cognitive function lasts for at least 2 solid hours after the workout concludes.
2 whole hours.
Yes, 2 solid hours of peak focus.
And it also measurably improves reaction times, right? I mean, there's that specific kind of funny example in the research about everyday reflexes.
Oh yes, you actually become significantly faster at catching a cup of coffee before it tips off the edge of a counter.
That is the ultimate real-world benefit right there, saving the Starbucks.
Honestly, yes. Because your motor cortex and your visual processing centers are just communicating at an optimal speed. Those neurotransmission pathways are fully lubricated, for lack of a better term, by that chemical cocktail.
Wait a second. If these massive focus and attention benefits only last for about a 2-hour window, then society basically has this completely backward.
How do you...
Well, we are always told to work out at 6 a.m. before anyone wakes up, or at 8 p.m. after all our work is totally done. But if I want to weaponize that 2-hour window of peak cognitive function, shouldn't I be doing a high-intensity workout right before I have to deliver a massive presentation?
Oh, absolutely.
Or right before a difficult exam?
Biologically speaking, yes, 100%. If you really understand this mechanism, you should absolutely time your physical exertion to serve your heaviest cognitive demands.
That is wild.
I mean, obviously, sleep and schedule constraints play a role in real life. But if you need peak executive function at 2 p.m. for a big salary negotiation, a noon workout is literally the smartest thing you can do to prime your brain.
Because you are basically dosing yourself with the exact neurotransmitters needed to execute complex, high-pressure tasks.
Exactly.
Okay, so a 2-hour chemical high definitely explains why her grant writing felt easy that specific afternoon. But she didn't just feel better for an afternoon. She completely transformed her baseline cognitive abilities over 18 months.
Right. And a temporary dopamine spike doesn't explain permanent changes to your memory.
Exactly. So what's happening long-term?
You're hitting on the exact reason researchers had to look beyond neurochemistry and look at the physical architecture of the brain. Long-term, consistent exercise actually changes the brain's anatomy.
It physically changes the shape of the brain.
Yes. And to understand how, we have to look at a structure deep inside the temporal lobes called the hippocampus.
Now, the hippocampus is typically described as the brain's filing cabinet for memories, right?
It's a bit more dynamic than just a filing cabinet, but yes, it is the physical site of memory consolidation.
So it takes what happens today and stores it for later.
Exactly. When you experience something, whether it's your first kiss, the birth of a child, or even a really complex scientific formula, the hippocampus is the structure responsible for encoding those short-term experiences into long-term memories so they actually last a lifetime.
Okay, but how does moving your legs on a treadmill change a structure that is buried deep inside your skull?
It triggers a biological process called neurogenesis,
Which means,
the creation of brand new brain cells.
hold on, I distinctly remember being taught in high school biology that you were born with all the brain cells you will ever have.
Yep, that was what we all learned.
And that from the moment you hit adulthood, it's just this slow, depressing die-off of neurons. Are you saying we were literally growing new brain tissue?
We are. That old biological dogma has been thoroughly, entirely debunked.
That is incredible.
When you exercise, the physical contraction of your muscles releases specific proteins into your bloodstream. These proteins actually travel up to the brain, they cross the blood-brain barrier, and they trigger the release of something called BDNF.
BDNF, what does that stand for?
Brain-Derived Neurotrophic Factor.
And what does BDNF actually do once it's up there?
It acts like a biological fertilizer.
Oh, wow.
It literally bathes the hippocampus and stimulates neural stem cells to divide, grow, and mature into fully functioning neurons. Over time, consistent exercise physically increases the volume of the hippocampus.
So by growing new cells, you are actively expanding your brain's capacity to form and retain long-term memories.
Exactly. But it's not just the hippocampus that grows, though.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. The second major area affected is the prefrontal cortex, which is located right behind your forehead.
Okay, and what does that area do?
This is basically the brain's command center. It dictates decision-making, sustained attention, complex problem-solving, and impulse control. It's essentially where your personality and your executive function live.
Oh, so that's the grant writing center.
Exactly. And studies show that long-term exercise structurally increases the volume and improves the neural networks within this specific area, too.
Okay, so if I'm tracking the biology here correctly, the immediate neurotransmitter boost we talked about earlier is basically like clearing the cache on your computer so the software runs a little faster for a few hours today.
I like that, yes.
But long-term exercise, driven by this BDNF stuff, is literally upgrading the physical hardware. Like, you are installing a significantly larger hard drive in the hippocampus and a much faster, more efficient processor in the prefrontal cortex.
That hardware analogy is incredibly accurate. You are fundamentally altering the physical equipment you use to interact with the world.
That is just so cool.
It really is.
Yeah.
And while upgrading that hardware makes daily tasks like grant writing or problem solving so much easier, the most crucial aspect of this physical growth is actually what it does for your neurological future.
Right, because does the actual physical size of these brain structures really matter that much in the long run?
It matters immensely, especially as we age. You really have to start thinking of the brain like a muscle. It responds to physical stress by building capacity.
Okay.
And physical volume matters because the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex are the two specific brain regions most vulnerable to neurodegenerative diseases.
And just normal age-related cognitive decline, right?
Yes, exactly.
You're talking about conditions like Alzheimer's disease and
Yeah.
dementia.
Both of those areas are highly active and metabolically demanding, and that makes them really susceptible to the accumulation of amyloid plaques and tau tangles.
Which are the biological markers of Alzheimer's.
Exactly. Now, it is totally critical to state clearly here that exercise is not a cure for Alzheimer's or dementia.
Right, we don't want to overstate it.
It cannot entirely stop the pathology of those diseases from occurring if you're genetically predisposed.
So then, if it doesn't cure the disease, how does having a bigger hippocampus actually help you?
Because it provides a massive cognitive reserve. Think of it as a structural buffer.
A buffer.
Yeah. If you spend decades exercising, you are building the strongest, densest, most luminous hippocampus and prefrontal cortex genetically possible for your specific body.
Okay.
So if a disease like Alzheimer's does begin to attack the brain, the disease has to destroy a significantly larger amount of tissue before your cognitive function drops below the threshold where you actually start showing symptoms.
I see. It's a game of neurological math.
It really is.
If you have millions of extra highly optimized neural connections, the disease simply has to burn through a lot more material before you start forgetting names or losing your spatial awareness.
Exactly. It takes much, much longer for the disease to have a noticeable detrimental effect on your daily life. By maximizing the structural volume of those brain areas, you are effectively buying yourself years and potentially even decades of high-quality, independent cognitive function.
You know, there's a phrase that really stuck out to me regarding all of this. It framed it perfectly. It said, it's a supercharged 401k for your brain, and it's completely free.
I love that phrase. It is so true.
It fundamentally shifts the entire motivation for going to the gym. I mean, we are so conditioned by the fitness industry to treat exercise as a vanity project, right?
Oh, completely. Chasing a lower body fat percentage or trying to look a certain way in a swimsuit.
Exactly. But if you reframe it as a cognitive 401k, you are no longer exercising for aesthetics. You are exercising for existential survival.
Yes.
You're basically investing in your ability to recognize your own family members and retain your own identity when you're 80 years old.
It completely moves fitness from a superficial goal to a fundamental requirement for maintaining your autonomy.
So, practically speaking, if I want to max out the contributions to this neurological 401k, what is the actual biological dosage required?
That is the big question.
Like, do I have to quit my job and train for an Ironman to get these benefits?
You know, thankfully, you absolutely do not need to become an elite endurance athlete. The general rule of thumb, based on current clinical data, is exercising 3 to 4 times a week for a minimum of 30 minutes per session.
Okay, but why specifically 30 minutes? Is there like a biological switch that suddenly flips at minute 29?
It mostly comes down to sustained cardiac output. It takes time for your cardiovascular system to reach a steady state of elevated blood flow.
Oh, so it's about keeping it up there.
Exactly. Once your heart rate is elevated and sustained, your muscles have the time to consistently release those signaling proteins we talked about earlier.
The ones that travel to the brain.
Right. And those trigger the release of BDNF. So 30 minutes is basically the reliable threshold to ensure that an entire biological cascade fully activates.
And the only real requirement is that it has to be aerobic, correct? Like you just have to elevate the heart rate.
It must be aerobic. It's the cardiorespiratory function, you know, the pumping of the heart and lungs that drives these specific neurological benefits.
Which is great news, honestly.
It is. It completely democratizes the process. You don't need a heavy lifting routine or a boutique fitness membership or specialized equipment.
You can literally just walk briskly around your neighborhood.
Brisk power walking is fantastic.
Sure.
Taking the stairs instead of the elevator every single day totally counts.
Nice.
The research even highlights mundane activities like power vacuuming.
Wait, power vacuuming?
Yes. If you are vigorously cleaning your house, moving continuously, and keeping your heart rate elevated for 30 minutes, you are achieving the exact same neurological benefit as someone paying for an expensive spin class. The brain only cares about the cardiac output, not the setting.
I really appreciate the accessibility of that. Like anyone, regardless of income or access to facilities, can trigger this neurogenesis.
Absolutely. Though, while that rule of thumb, 3 to 4 times a week for 30 minutes is the current gold standard, the ultimate goal of researchers is to move past generalized advice altogether.
Okay, where is it heading then?
The future of fitness and neuroscience is precision medicine.
Precision medicine. What does a precision prescription for exercise actually look like?
Well, it would factor in your baseline fitness, your age, and crucially, your genetics.
Oh, so it's personalized to your DNA.
Exactly. For instance, individuals carrying the APOE4 gene variant have a significantly higher genetic risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. They might process BDNF differently than someone without that variant. So the future involves a simple genetic test that allows a doctor to say, based on your specific DNA and brain architecture, you don't need 30 minutes of zone 2 cardio. You specifically need 45 minutes 4 times a week to optimize your prefrontal cortex.
Wow. We're essentially treating physical movement as a highly targeted, precisely dosed pharmaceutical intervention.
Because biologically, that is exactly what it is.
That is just fascinating. So if we step back and look at the entirety of this mechanism, moving your body physically alters the trajectory of your brain's life cycle.
It really does.
You get an immediate chemical cocktail of dopamine and noradrenaline that sharpens your focus today. Over the next year, you harness BDNF to literally grow new neural hardware.
Yeah.
And over a lifetime, you construct a dense cognitive shield that protects your identity and memories from degenerative decline.
It is the ultimate preventative medicine. And the barrier to entry is literally nothing more than a raised heart rate.
Which brings up a really glaring contradiction in how we've designed our modern lives.
Oh, definitely.
And think about the structure of our society. If physical exercise is a free, universally accessible cognitive enhancement drug that physically grows the brain and sharpens executive function, why do our educational systems systematically cut recess and physical education classes just as academic pressure increases on kids?
It is entirely counterproductive.
And why do modern corporate environments demand that we sit perfectly still in ergonomic chairs, staring at screens for 8 straight hours, all in the name of maximizing productivity?
We are actively engineering movement out of our daily routines at the exact moment. Neuroscience is proving that movement is the fundamental requirement for our brains to function at their highest capacity.
It's crazy. If we took this science seriously, our entire workday and school day wouldn't just politely accommodate a brief walk, it would legally require physical movement as a basic function of cognitive labor.
Absolutely.
And that is definitely something to seriously mull over the next time you find yourself anchored to your desk for 4 hours straight. Thank you all so much for joining us for this conversation. Until next time, stay curious and maybe go take a power walk.